When you picture the fall of Rome, you likely imagine barbarians at the gates. You don't picture a Roman senator carefully clipping the edges off a gold coin. But what if the empire wasn't just sacked, but quietly hollowed out from the inside? The real story starts not with a bang, but with a subtle, almost invisible decision. Look, empires don't just die from external wounds alone. The financial rot began long before the first Visigoth crossed the Danube. Honestly, can you really destroy a civilization with just money? The first crack appeared in something as simple as the silver denarius. This coin was the lifeblood of the entire Roman world, you know? Emperors discovered they could stretch their silver supply by mixing in cheaper metals. At first it was just a little copper and nobody really noticed, but the temptation to create more money from thin air was too powerful to resist. What started as a trickle of deception became a raging flood of debasement. Within a couple of centuries, that silver coin was almost entirely copper. Think about that for a second. Your life savings, the soldier's pay, the price of bread, all tied to a lie. So what happens when everyone realizes the money in their hand is basically fake? Merchants, of course, weren't fools. They simply raised their prices to compensate for the weaker currency. This is the ancient, brutal birth of what we now call inflation. And once this cycle starts, it's incredibly difficult to stop. The empire needed cash to pay its massive army and fund its vast bureaucracy. With less real silver, the only solution was to mint even more of the bad coins. This created a terrifying feedback loop of more money and higher prices. The government was literally fueling the fire that was burning its own economy down. Now, here's the part they don't teach you in most history classes. This financial chaos created two dangerous new forces within Roman society. The first was a class of hyper-wealthy elites who knew how to game the system. While the common citizen watched their coins turn to junk, the rich got richer. How did they manage that, you might wonder? They shifted their wealth into the only things that held real value: land and gold. Gold became the secret, stable currency of the powerful hidden from the state. This meant the empire's tax base was evaporating into private hoards, and that leads us directly to the second, even more destructive force. The Roman state, desperate for real revenue, had to get creative. They began taxing the remaining middle class and small farmers into oblivion. Honestly, can you see the trap closing? To avoid crippling taxes, many farmers made a desperate deal. They surrendered their land titles to those powerful local elites for protection. In return, they became tenants, bound to the very soil they once owned. This wasn't just an economic shift, it was a social earthquake. The independent Roman citizen, the backbone of the republic, was disappearing. A new system of patronage and dependency was taking root in the countryside. So the empire lost twice. It lost taxable land, and it lost loyal citizens. But the financial death spiral had one more brutal twist to unleash. With cash becoming worthless, how do you pay a soldier on the frontier? You can't feed a family with copper-clad coins that no merchant will accept. The answer was as practical as it was destructive. The state started paying soldiers and officials in kind, with food, supplies, and land. This meant the government wasn't just a government anymore. It became a gigantic, inefficient logistics company trying to manage everything. Local commanders started dealing directly with local landlords for their supplies. And who do you think those soldiers felt more loyal to? A distant emperor or the local boss who fed them? This fractured the very idea of a unified Roman state. Power was leaking from the center, day by day, coin by coin. You see, the Roman economy wasn't just about buying and selling things. It was a fragile web of trust that stretched from Britain to Egypt. And when the money failed, that entire web began to violently unravel. Look at what happened to the cities, the dazzling centers of Roman life. Their survival depended on a constant flow of tax money and trade goods. But as cash became unreliable, long-distance trade started to seize up. Why risk shipping grain across a stormy sea for payment in worthless metal? Local regions had no choice but to turn inward and become self-sufficient. This collapse of trade meant cities could no longer be fed from faraway provinces. Honestly, can you imagine a major metropolis just slowly starving by choice? One by one, people abandoned the urban centers for the countryside. The population of Rome itself plummeted over just a few generations. This wasn't a planned migration, it was a desperate retreat for basic survival. So the grand Roman city, that engine of culture and administration, simply withered. But the empire's response to this crisis made everything so much worse. Emperors, needing to control the chaos, issued strict economic edicts. The most famous was the Edict of Diocletian, which tried to freeze all prices and wages. Think about that. A government decreeing what a loaf of bread must cost. How do you think that worked out for the average Roman baker? It failed utterly and completely because you can't legislate against scarcity. Goods simply vanished from the official markets and moved into a booming black economy. This created a new layer of criminals and corrupt officials working in the shadows. Law and order, a pillar of Roman pride, was becoming just another commodity for sale. Now consider the soldier standing on a wall in the pouring German rain. His pay is late, it's in soggy, debased coins, and his rations are thin. Where does his loyalty truly lie at that moment? Increasingly, it lay with the general who could pay him in real silver or plunder. This financial weakness directly fueled the constant civil wars of the late empire. General after general was proclaimed emperor by troops looking for a reliable paymaster. The state was now funding the very armies that would tear it apart. And each civil war drained the treasury further, requiring more bad money to be minted. You can see the cycle here, and it's a perfect trap. There's a grim curiosity in how they tried to solve the tax problem, though. With wealth hiding in land and gold, the state made a brutal calculation. They switched from collecting taxes and money to collecting taxes and actual stuff, grain, cloth, livestock. This turned tax collectors into armed foraging parties, stripping the provinces bare. It crushed any incentive for a farmer to produce more than the bare minimum. Why would you grow extra wheat just to have it taken away? This system, called the annona militaris, kept the army fed but killed the economy's future. Investment and innovation simply stopped. So, what was left for an ambitious young person in this new, grim world? The path to security no longer lay in commerce or civic service. It lay in attaching yourself to a powerful landowner, a patron, for protection. The free citizen was being replaced by the bonded client. The social decay went right to the very top, Even the emperor's own administration began paying its dues in the system of favors. Government positions were sold to the highest bidder, who then used them to recoup their investment through corruption. The state wasn't just broke, it had become a parasite, feeding on its own body. The money had destroyed the very concept of a common good. Now, let's follow that final frayed thread to its inevitable end. The Western Empire couldn't pay its frontier armies in real money anymore, so it made a fateful bargain with whole tribes of Germanic warriors. The deal was simple: defend our borders, and we'll give you land to settle within them. But what did Roman land even mean when the treasury was empty and authority was a joke? These federated troops, like the Visigoths, weren't conquerors at first, they were contractors. They were just the last in a long line of people expecting proper payment from Rome. And when even that payment in land was delayed or contested, they simply took it. The famous sack of Rome in 410 wasn't a sudden invasion from a wild frontier. It was a collection action by a very powerful, very angry creditor. Look at it from their perspective. They'd provided a service and never got paid. So the empire didn't fall to a foreign culture it couldn't understand. It was repossessed by its own disgruntled employees. The Eastern Empire, centered on Constantinople, survived this fate for one crucial reason. It simply had more reliable gold coins coming in from its richer trade networks. That solid gold, solidus, bought loyalty that the West's copper couldn't. But in the West, the very idea of a public, universal currency had died. Without trust in that single coin, the political unity it symbolized became impossible. Power shattered into 1,000 pieces, each controlled by a local strongman with a private army. The grand Roman infrastructure, the roads, the aqueducts, the courts, fell into disrepair. Why maintain a highway system when there's no long-distance trade to use it? The economy didn't collapse into chaos. It shrank dramatically and permanently. It retreated to the isolated, self-sufficient estate, the precursor to the medieval manor. That's the ultimate legacy of the financial meltdown. It rewired society for local survival, not imperial grandeur. So, did money destroy ancient Rome? Not directly, no. The real culprit was the failure to protect the integrity of that money. It was the slow, corrosive replacement of trust with deception at the highest level. When the state lied about the value of its own currency, it broke a sacred covenant. That single lie unraveled everything built upon it: the army, the markets, the social contract. It turned citizens into subjects, and then subjects into serfs. It turned soldiers into mercenaries, and generals into emperors. The barbarians at the gates were just the final symptom, not the disease. The patient had already bled out from 1,000 small, self-inflicted financial wounds. The fall of Rome isn't a story of swords and fire. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when money loses its meaning.